Real Trees Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by RTP Outdoors, Trophy Rock, Redneck Blinds, Wilderness Athlete, Hoyman Tree Saws, Ozonics, Nikon, Easton Arrows, America's Best Bowstrings, Viking Solutions, Spot Hog Releases, Cabela's, Hoyt, Frigid Forage, Fuse, Grizzly Coolers, Drake Non-Typical, Wasp Archery, Muddy Outdoors, and Real Tree Edge. Hunt with an edge.
It's March 4th today, and I'm going to go for a little walk on the farm to try to find some antlers here. There's a buck that I'm most interested in. I'm going into the area where this deer was living last fall, and it's a deer we call the chocolate rack buck. Another one of my super creative names for the deer that we hunt. I'll take you along on this walk. Hopefully we can find some other deer or some other antlers as well, but it's a beautiful day. Probably 50, 55 degrees. Perfect conditions to go for a little walk. Here's something that people don't realize about this farm. We show it a lot of times from the open areas, from the fields, and occasionally when we're recovering a deer, but this place is super thick. We've done a lot of timber stand improvement on this farm over the years, and as part of my shed hunting here, I'm going to go ahead and just show you some of the areas, some of the cover that exists here. It's pretty amazing, really. I mean, it's about as thick as any place I've ever hunted. The spot behind me is an example of that, and I'll show you a few more spots along the way as we go here. Wanted to show you something here. There's a big deep ditch behind me that runs probably 300 or more yards up through this part of the farm, and there's only about 2 or 3 spots along the whole length of this ditch where the deer cross it. There might not even be that many. There's a real heavy trail at the upper end where they go around it, and I'd say it's one of the better stand locations on this farm. We did put a tree stand up on there a couple of years ago. I just haven't had a chance to hunt it much. Tyler Jordan hunted it a couple of years ago when he was here hunting and shot a pretty decent 10-pointer out of it. But just thought I'd show you the kind of the lay of the land makes a huge difference in the way we hunt. Just check out this ditch. Now I'm at the lower end of that ditch. You can see a pretty heavy trail that goes around the ditch at this point. I honestly think there's only a couple spots along the full length of this ditch where the deer can cross. The lower end down here, and then I know they go around it on the upper end. And I'm not 100% sure there's even a spot in between. So these are the kind of funnels that if you can find them in the area where you hunt, they're no-brainers. What you do is you come in, I'll show you the bottom of this ditch a little bit better, but you come in ideally on the lower end like this. Some pretty decent tracks right there. So you come in the lower end. This one's a mess. If you look up in there, it's completely loaded up with blow down trees, and that would take a lot of work to clean out. But you would come in the lower end and walk your way all the way up the ditch until you get to the upper end, and that's where your stand location would be. And that way you can enter and exit completely from the opposite direction where you expect the deer to be. If there's a crossing part way up, you might consider stopping there, but a lot of times if you stop short of the very top, you end up with a lot of swirling winds. I talk about using creeks and ditches a lot to get to and from tree stands. This is an example of a creek down in this bottom. That ditch that I was showing you just a minute ago branches off this creek. This would be, if I was hunting this part of the farm, this would definitely be my entry-exit route. There's ridges on both sides of this, where I'm sure the deer bed. No doubt there's some really strong crossings on here. Downside you've got with hunting those crossings themselves and not hunting up on the ridges is the swirling winds that you get. So I'm going to walk up here and show you a little bit more of this creek section, but it's when you're scouting, you want to find these spots first. You don't want to look for the deer sign first and then try to figure out how you're going to get to and from your stand locations. You want to find those entry and exit routes first, and then find the best possible stand locations that are along those entry and exit routes. I just came out of the creek into this little field down here in this bottom. I'm going to do a 360 so you can see it here. It's a pretty cool spot. I used to have a food plot down here, but it's been it's been a few years. I'm going to have to replant this again at some point. It's just really hard to get to because you got to go through a lot of brush. But over my shoulder, I don't know if you can see it from this camera angle, but I see the first antler of the day. I'm going to walk over there and take a look at this one and see what it is. Nothing super spectacular, but at least I'm on the board. I'm having a pretty good day here so far. There's another one right over my shoulder. I don't know if you can see it back there, but the spot would take too long to describe exactly where it is, but it's a thick area of cedars where I think the deer bed quite a bit. There's a lot of open timber around this on different sides, but I'll show you the antler and then we can talk a little bit more about this spot. Again, it's not a giant deer by any means, but it's a pretty decent buck. And I mean, not the chocolate rack buck, but it's just fun to find them. I'm going to keep looking here. Hopefully I can find that deer I'm looking for. Well, I guess this one counts. He's not much of a buck either, but at least I keep racking up antlers. I'm in that area now where we saw that chocolate rack buck towards the end of last season, so hopefully I can pick him up along the edges here. I am going to drop down into the timber in a few spots and check out some trails that are running back and forth toward bedding areas, but this is where I would expect to find him if I'm going to. My antler hunt for the day got cut a little bit short, so I'm going to have to come back again tomorrow and see if I can find that chocolate rack buck's antlers. So check back again tomorrow and see if I can find them.